the 2020 Femmes du Vin Harvest Seminar Series and today's seminar, Women in Power Napa Valley Style. Thank you everyone for joining us today and Napa Valley Vintners for making this seminar possible. Napa Valley has fostered notable female voices in the wine industry, from CEOs and winemakers to marketing directors, writers, educators, and winery owners. The Napa Valley ladies joining us today have led the way for championing females in the wine industry. Their actions have empowered and inspired female voices, promoted equality, created work-life integration, and have provided peer-to-peer mentorship. Today, we'll be exploring the pathways of three phenomenal women in the wine business of Napa Valley, including best practices, how to set yourself up for success, critical thinking, leadership techniques, and what opportunities Napa Valley has been able to offer women in wine. Today's 90-minute seminar will consist of 60 minutes of discussion and 30 minutes of Q&A. Please feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A box at any time. You can support Femmes du Vin by donating to the not-for-profit with proceeds going to the Diversity and Inclusion Scholarship Fund at femmeduvin.org. We would also like to take this time to recognize that there has been discussion in the industry with the New York Times article around sexual harassment of women in wine. Femmes du Vin will be addressing these issues in the soon future. Today, we'll be continuing our seminar honoring the women that are joining us today and raising up women in wine. So stay tuned for our action plan at femmeduvin.org. I am Renee Sferrazza. And I would like to notice that my name is Renee Sferrazza and our hashtags and handles have just appeared on the screen. And you can feel free to interact with us on social media using those. We really encourage you to do so. My name is Renee Sferrazza and I'll be your moderator today. I am a certified sommelier, Toronto-based entrepreneur and influencer under the name Wine by Renee. I also work as a wine writer and blogger and social media advisor for businesses in wine, as well as being part of the board of directors of Femmes du Vin and the Canadian Association of Professional Sommeliers. I am honored and delighted to be moderating this panel of amazing women today. Now let's introduce our panelists. First, we have Emma Swain, the CEO of Saint Superi Estate Vineyards and Winery. Emma brings more than 20 years of experience in the wine industry to her current role. She has worked throughout many facets of the wine industry, including domestic and international sales strategy, hospitality, finance, administration, and human resources. She started her career in finance before joining the Naboom Coppola Winery, working to reunify the historic vineyards of the Inglebrook properties. She then spent 13 years at Sebastiani Vineyards and Wineries as their COO, where she repositioned the fourth generation family-owned winery as the respected high-quality producer. She was named a National American Business Awards, Stevie Awards finalist for Best Finance Executive, and is an active member of the Napa Valley Vintner community. She is the immediate past chair of the Wine Market Council, as well as the past trustee and past chair of both the Napa Valley Vintners Association and Land Trust of Napa County Board, and continues to work with special projects committees for both organizations. Thank you, Emma, for joining us today.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be with all of you today.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Priyanka Dar French. Priyanka is the winemaker at Signorello Estates in Napa Valley. Priyanka was born and brought up in Mumbai, India, and is the daughter of two academic physicists. She is the first Indian to have received a master's in science of viticulture and enology at the University of California, Davis. She also holds a diploma in enology from the University of Dijon. Her experience in wine has been fostered in Napa, as well as traveling through the regions of Burgundy, Cognac, Bordeaux, and New Zealand. She has also worked with Tontellet d'Impost, a renowned cooperage, establishing market and providing technical support to wineries in India. Apart from her passion for winemaking, she is also a contributing wine writer for publications in India as well. Thank you, Priyanka, for joining us.
Thanks, Renee. Thank you for having me. Very excited for our conversation today.
Thank you. And our final panelist today is Kelli A. White, Director of Education for the Pacific Union Company in Napa Valley and author of Napa Valley Then and Now. Kelli has worked as a sommelier at New York's Veritas as well as at Press in St. Helena. In St. Helena has covered many of the wine industry's top publications. She was named one of Food and Wine's top 10 sommeliers in the country. Her writing has appeared in Guildsom, World of Fine Wine, Robb Report, Sommelier Journal, Le Pan, and Venice. At Venice, Kelli was a key member of the MAP team and worked with famed Italian cartographer Alessandro Massagnetti to map the appellations of Napa Valley. In 2011, she co-founded a wine brand called Houndstooth and also made a brief appearance in the documentary Psalm 2 Into the Bottle. She has received enormous critical acclaim, winning both the IACP Award for Best New Wine, Beer, or Spirit Book, as well as a Graphic Design Award. Her writing earned her 2 coveted Roederer Awards, and she was nominated for Sommelier and Wine Director of the Year in 2017 by Wine Enthusiast magazine, who then named her Top 40 Under 40 Wine Influencer in 2018. She most recently contributed to the 8th edition of the World Atlas of Wine. Thank you for joining us, Kelli.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We have heard from some strong and amazing female voices throughout this seminar series. And for this seminar, we'll be doing a roundtable style discussion, hearing from these amazing women in wine at the top of their fields in Napa Valley. The Napa region brings a unique look to this topic. In 1886, a pioneering woman named Josephine Tichon founded one of Napa's original 13 wineries. She was the first woman to build and operate a winery in California. At the time, her winery was known as Tichon Cellars, but is today fondly known as Freemark Abbey Winery, located in the same estate in St. Helena. After more than 130 years, that legacy carries on with the introduction of winemaker Christine Melton, the first female winemaker since the original winemaker Josephine. Women have led prominent roles within Napa Valley's wine industry ever since. From the meeting rooms to the vineyards, women have played an integral role in the wine industry. In fact, today, about 60% of Napa Valley wineries either have a female principal, CEO, president, or winemaker. Thank you greatly to our panelists for joining us today. I want to start off with a question about Napa Valley. Napa has really shined a light on the women of wine in the region. Is there something about the culture of Napa Valley that has offered women advantages in pursuing more powerful careers in the wine industry? I'd like to pose this question to Emma and Priyanka. Emma, can you start first?
Certainly. Well, I think, Napa Valley is one of the greatest places in the world. And I love living here and I love working here. And that's because it's a small and really tight community. I think that there's tremendous respect for each other. We travel together, we work together, and the community is so small that when you have a Napa Valley Vintners meeting, really it's not going to take you more than 15 to 25 minutes to get there from anywhere in the valley. And I think that that's an important part of the community that we are, because we are a community. We're very active in volunteering and giving back to the community. And I think that respect for each other is developed from a lot of interaction. And, since the very beginning of the Napa Valley Vintners, there's been this thought process that a rising tide lifts all boats. And everyone working together means both men and women working together and showing respect for each other. And we've got a lot of strong leadership, particularly with Linda Reef at the Napa Valley Vintners, who's been the CEO and president for over 25 years. And I think that strong leadership filters out through the community.
That's amazing to hear. Priyanka, what are your viewpoints on this, as well as to how Napa was able to kind of create this culture?
I absolutely agree with everything Emma said. I think it's important to point out, very early on, Napa did give opportunities to women to, come into the industry. And the women that did enter really created a mark for themselves. We, from the production side, if I just have to list off a few names, we have Heidi Barrett, Kathy Corison, Celia Welsh, and they showed what women can do when they're put in positions of leadership, when they're put in positions of decision making, and when they're a part of the fabric of the team. And I think that what Emma just said about, a rising tide carries all boats, that's what women in our generation or my generation are now doing. We've been given this door has been opened for us by some incredible women leaders. And the new generation that's coming comes from that inspiration, along with a passion to continue to have that conversation, along with a passion to continue to evolve. And the Vintners have been key in allowing those conversations to grow and bringing people together. And I hope that with this, I feel like general culture that we have in the Valley, that Napa will continue to stay at the forefront of important conversations in the future as well.
Yes, and that's a really amazing point to bring up about the community that's there. As we continue in our careers, a big question that I find a lot of women have surrounds education, where to study, what to study, and where you want to go with it. To all of our panelists, starting with Emma, then Priyanka and Kelli, what education in any form have you pursued in your career? And do you feel like it was a necessary thing to get you to where you are today? Emma.
Well, I think that, wineries are businesses. So we're a business that involves farming, science, marketing, finance, sales, all of that is involved in our business. So I think the most important thing is to play to your strengths. I mean, my degree is in ag and managerial economics. I studied biology. I studied winemaking, not to the degree that a winemaker does, but I definitely, took viticulture, winemaking, and chemistry classes, food science classes. I worked on my master's in taxation, which is something I really don't work on today. But all of those things bring more knowledge about different areas. And I am a big fan of continuous education. I'm a CPA, and I have to do at least 40 hours every year of continuous education. But not all of my continuous education is focused on finance. It's always from digital marketing to human resource issues, legal issues, and things that can move our business forward, I want to learn about. And I think that that's important for all of us. You never stop learning. And particularly with COVID, our entire team is taking classes right now on different areas, getting their WSETs or studying digital marketing, studying graphics design, studying French, studying business. But we're all working really hard and trying to learn new skills, whether it's a formal course or cross-training each other. But, it's very important to continue to learn. You never stop learning. And that's the fun part. There's lots of really smart people out there who can teach you new things.
That's always great to hear, to move things forward and continue learning, because you could put them directly into what you do. So to Priyanka as well, what were the educations that you pursued to get to your career? And do you feel like they were necessary for you?
Well, as you mentioned in my introduction, Renee, I am the daughter of two physicists. So it goes without saying that education and academics had a very, very important role in my house growing up. And I think that, as Emma mentioned, the industry has so many different facets that come along with being a member of this industry. I've also found that everyone's path in the wine industry is very fluid, and it really kind of depends on the aspects that touch to your passions, the aspects that work with the skill set that you have, where you can really emphasize your strengths. And I feel like everyone kind of creates that pathway on them by themselves. So my biggest, I think, life goal, and something that I keep trying to tell everyone, is to be a forever student. Especially right now, I think the industry is, evolving in so many different ways at such a rapid pace, whether it comes to packaging, whether it comes to varietals, whether it comes to how we highlight stories of the wineries. There's just such great input that is coming in, and it leaves so much opportunity to find your niche and to really go ahead and create something in there. So I definitely am a big proponent for continuous education, for keeping yourself in tune with the trends and what's going on, and to just build your technical skill set for whatever it is that you choose to pursue. But the more you know about the industry, the more wholesome your outlook gets, and I think that benefits everyone, whether you're an employee or an employer.
Mm-hmm. And Kelli, to you as well, what did you do in your education to get towards your career? And do you feel like your education background was a necessary need for you?
Well, I've had some evolving thoughts on the process. I went to a high school for math and science, and then entered college studying neuroscience and exited with a degree in art history. So pretty impractical choices all around, given where I ended up, or so I thought for a while. And I think I wasted a lot of time feeling insecure about, my lack of kind of deliberate training in the wine sphere. Lucky for me, a lot of different elements of the wine industry, the learning is apprentice based, right? So if you can attach yourself to a mentor, you can really learn and grow without a formal, official educational system kind of backing you up. And so that served me well. But honestly, as my career evolved kind of out of restaurants and more into wine writing and communication, I found that my diverse educational background was actually a huge benefit. Because one of the best things about wine, and speaking for myself, but I would imagine this is true for the rest of you as well, is that, from a context point of view, you can come at it from a lot of different cultural angles, right? There's not only language and travel and all that, but it's a artifact of culture, right? Of history, of science. There's certainly an aesthetic element. And business is there too, and finance, and sociology, and labor practices. I mean, it's endless. And so I think that the bigger you can make your mind, the more it'll benefit the wine industry, right? I think you can either super focus on one thing and be the best at that, and that's great. And some people do that, and more power to them. But I like the broader perspective of, when I feel like having an understanding of art trends over the centuries, gives me a certain perspective that maybe gives me an advantage when I'm reading articles or looking at labels or, whatever. And that's just a small example. The science piece is there too, and social history and all that stuff. So I'm a big fan of just kind of casting about, following what interests you, and not being so myopically focused on the wine industry.
That's a really interesting point of view to take, especially with all of our other panelists' conversations around education. So thank you. And one thing that I really wanted to touch on in this seminar is something that also came up in one of our past seminars as well. And that was around family-owned businesses in wine. Our previous seminar on Burgundy, we had a question come up about how to achieve your career in the wine industry when a barrier can be that you're not part of the family. So because we have Emma here with us today, who has worked for family-owned wineries, I thought I would pose this question to you, Emma. After working for these family-owned wineries, how were you able to accomplish moving into that business strategy?
I think that each winery, like I said, every winery is a business, and each winery ownership has different skill sets. Some winery owners are stronger in winemaking, some are stronger in marketing, some are stronger in sales. And so, fitting into that niche and providing value and in that role. So, my skill is operations, while also finance. That's how I started at Sebastiani when we were quite large, and helped them sell the winery a couple times. But my operational skills, I think, are my strong suit. And a lot of winery owners don't want to deal with that side of the business, or they inherited the winery and they didn't start it as the winemaker. So there's different areas where you can add value and move up, because not everyone is good at every single thing. So you need, if you have a niche that you're very good at, well, then follow that niche and focus on it, because you can add value in that area. For me, it's a broader range. Like Kelli was saying, I'm better at the big picture and the overall operations than one specific topic.
I think that's a really interesting viewpoint to look at from it, because it really takes the winery into a business account. And thank you so much. As we grow in the industry, we require access to different opportunities and mentorship, as well as networking. So what I wanted to also touch on during this conversation and pose this question to Kelli are, what are some best practices in networking that we can use in the industry, and some things for mentees to know as they move forward?
So I want to start answering this question by saying it's interesting. It's kind of a brain twist to be up here being celebrated as like a powerful leader woman in wine, because until very recently, I think I felt like still really in the hustle, like I was trying to break through or get there. And you never really, it's not like the curtain suddenly opens and you're like, oh, I'm here. But I will say from a networking perspective, I have noticed that very recently, my experience with networking has gone from me actively networking to people sort of networking in my direction. And that's been interesting to see both sides of it. So I will say, just to go earlier in my career, I had a real scattershot approach to networking. I was excited to meet anybody, and take any opportunity and whatever, without thinking more about it. I got more deliberate in my networking. One of the best things that I attended is I got a scholarship to attend the Wine Writers Symposium at Meadowood. I did this 2 years, and really was like, okay, went in with a lot of attention, researched the attendees, was knowledgeable about who was going to be in the room and their background, and who I wanted to get in front of. And specifically, my goal at the time was to write for World of Fine Wine magazine. So I zeroed in on Neil Beckett and just sort of relentlessly stalked him nicely, I hope. Because that was, for me, that was the publication, and that was who I wanted to write for. I, was similarly nicely aggressive with Eric Asimov and, Karen McNeil, and people that I was just excited to meet and get in front of. And recently I had a young woman come up to me and ask, she was really wanted to get into wine and food writing. And she was asking my advice about how to break through. And I think that, a lot of elements of the wine industry and just any industry, it has to do with networking, right? But I would argue that probably, especially, there's so few paid writing opportunities that it might even be more important in the world of writing. And so she had a lot of enthusiasm. She didn't have necessarily clear direction of like the ideal publication she wanted to write for. And obviously I didn't know the tone of her writing or, her strengths or necessarily. So I offered to read some writing samples and connect her. Well, months went by. And I feel like, I've thought about this interaction a little bit, and that, I want to give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that this is coming and that she's just really worried and polishing and making it perfect. But the truth of the matter is, I can't, because it did take so long, I can't help but wonder, like, is she really hungry? Like, was she really serious, or is she maybe a little bit flaky? And that is, I can't help but that's going to color the recommendation that I make going forward. And so I think it's really important when you're networking to strike while the iron is hot, because I'm not speaking for myself. I'm not so busy that it's just like a sea of faces. But like, if you were, say, in front of Jancis Robinson and you gave her your business card and you got hers, you need to email that woman like that night and be like, we met today in this context, and I am now following up about this specific thing, rather than a month from now to write someone like her and be like, hey, we met a month ago and you said I could reach out. That's much less effective. So I think, you have to be polite, you have to be focused, you have to be intentional, and you have to have really good follow through for it to work out. Otherwise, you're just meeting people to meet people.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it, is showing intention with what you plan on doing, especially as a mentee, between how you plan on doing your networking. So kind of touching on that and moving forward, as people often ask you, I'm sure all of our panelists, about what tidbits of information they would like to pass on to other mentees. I am curious to hear about any best practices each of you have adopted that have aided you in your career. And for this one, I'd love to start with Priyanka, and then we'll move into Emma and Kelli. Priyanka.
Well, definitely what Kelli said. I think being politely aggressive, but I think that also comes with just being confident of what your questions are and what it is that you're trying to get from the conversation. You know, seek out people that excite you, that inspire you, people that, you know, whose work you admire, and go when you go forward to network with them, go with a clear goal in mind, go with a clear question in mind. And I cannot emphasize enough on striking when the iron is hot. I love that phrase because it's important. It's important to create that connection right after you've had a chance to meet someone. From, I would say, a best practices, just in a general career point of view, I read this great book that was titled Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish. And it's something that's been very inspirational for me. I think you always have to keep asking questions, keep wanting to know more, keep wanting to find out more, whether it's, you know, about a focused question in your field or what's the next step forward. Keep being inquisitive about what is going on and how you can best fit in different situations. Be mindful of who you're with, of your team, of the people that you're interacting with. How is it that your interaction is being based? I think understanding your team and having a good dynamic takes you so much further, because now when you go into work, you're growing as a unit, and I feel like you just become more efficient. You become more excited about the things that you're going in for. And long-term vision, I think I did talk about how the industry is fluid, but I feel like at the same time, it's important with every experience that you receive to start to model about how it fits into your long-term vision. And that idea will keep evolving, but it's important to constantly be thinking about what is my goal and where I'm going next and what it is that I'm doing to get to that point. So I would say these are probably some of the things I've incorporated so far. And I see all the women that I really look up to. You know, they're go-getters. They don't apologize for their opinions. They don't apologize for their experience. And I think just keep pushing forward, keep pushing that envelope.
That's a great way to think about it. I really like your point of view from that perspective, especially talking about mindfulness and considering everybody else in the room as well. Emma, is there something that you've put in as a best practice that has aided you in your career?
Well, for me, you know, none of us are perfect. And the quest is always for perfection, and we're never going to get there. So saying to me, that's the way it's always been done, just creates a visceral reaction with me. I cannot bear to hear that expression, because that does not mean it's right. And it doesn't mean it's good. It maybe means that it sort of worked, if that. And just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean that it can't be significantly better. And so just looking at everything you do and how can I improve this, even if it's a small adjustment or a large adjustment, but how can I make things better? And every day getting up and looking at what you're doing to see, can I make this better? Is there a better way to do this? Because just because you're in this role doesn't mean you're done. You're just getting started. Every time you change jobs, you move to a new position, you have a promotion, you're just warming up. And now you're going to start a whole new thing and a whole new cycle of continuous improvement. So I think for me, that's the most important thing. Just always trying to be your very best and never accept that the standard.
It's such an interesting viewpoint to take, especially from coming from all the experience that you have as well, Kelli. Sorry, Emma, my bad. Sorry about that. Is because I think people often feel like once they get somewhere, they're done. But just to keep reminding yourself that you're not done where you are. Yeah. Moving into Kelli, sorry about that. You were apparently on my mind a minute ago. So what are some best practices that you have put into your career moving forward?
Well, as I've mentioned to you guys before in our little rehearsal, I think if I have one superpower professionally, it's just listening and understanding what the person in front of me wants and expects, and then being able to communicate that back at them. And I like to call that lip syncing for your life. Just something I totally made up myself. But because I think it's important. It's an important skill. And I want to be clear here that I'm not advocating to be passive in your role or to be at all subservient in your opinions. What I'm suggesting is that listening is really, really, really important on a lot of levels. It's important in a job interview context where, I think we sometimes think, okay, a job interview is me selling myself, when what you're really trying to do is advocate that you are the best fit, right? And so in order to make that point, you need to understand the size of the hole you're putting your piece into, right? You need to understand the shape, what they're looking for, what they want. So you have to really engage on their level, not just be like, these are my accomplishments and these are the ways in which I shine. Obviously, that has to be a part of it too. And then once you're in the room, once you have the job, I think you also, really need to listen and pay attention. And I think that this is important, especially for women, because I think for so long, and for BIPOC people as well, because I think for so long we're just used to not being heard. And so there can be this pressure to like get your opinion out and, and make your point and you want to shine, you want to take up space, and that's great. You should absolutely do that, but not sacrificing, listening to what your bosses want, what your colleagues are, where your colleagues are coming from, and just, trying to really understand the general tone and intention of the people and also of the meeting. And for example, one of the things that I think is really useful is if somebody is talking to you, say your boss, you say, okay, this is what I heard. So you're saying this is what you're looking for. And I've been counseled by women far more successful to me to follow up meetings with an email being like, these are my notes from the meetings. This was my understanding of the takeaway, as a way to just make sure you're on the same page, because you don't want to expend your energy and going in a different direction than what was intended and communicated because you weren't paying attention. So I would say listening is really important.
That's a really good, useful tip. Like we always hear about like, make sure you're listening, make sure you're doing that. But these action plan ways of like putting that listening into action, I think is something that I don't think a lot of women or even people coming up in their careers get to learn until later. So like, thank you so much for those tidbits of information. I saw that I think Emma agrees with you in the chat over here about listening as a good service tool. Before we move on to our next question, Emma, did you want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think Kelli made an excellent point, and it's so important to listen to people, to understand what they want. And particularly as a sommelier, as someone in sales and marketing, is and in our daily business in all areas, but particularly to understand what your customer wants and how to provide that service. It's not about what wine you want to sell, it's what do they want to drink. And listening to how they describe it and what they're looking for is super important.
On that note as well to you, Emma, is there some ways that you've put into practice to best get customers to talk to you and to listen to what they want to say, but to kind of pull them in that direction of understanding more of what they want?
Well, I think Kelli made a good point. Listening and repeating back what people are saying to make sure you're getting that clear understanding is so important. And, it's about putting the other person, the business, the brand first. It's not about you. And every time it's not about you, it's about the brand, it's about the company, then you succeed. Because if you do what's best for the customer, if you do what's best for the team, for the brand, for wine quality, for the vineyard, every time you do that, you're successful. And if you think all you think about is how can I be successful, you're never going to be successful. You need to do what's best for the company, the customer, or the job.
That's a great way to look at it. Thank you so much, Emma. Sorry for the random question there, but I just saw your point and I couldn't help it. So moving into the next point about our seminar today, I really wanted to talk about 3 key topics I think we all face as we move through our career, and that's apologizing, problem solving, and taking risks. I think that all of these aspects come into your life, in your career, in different ways, shapes, and forms. And we'll open this up to all of our panelists. I am going to start with Priyanka, and then we'll move to Emma and Kelli. Priyanka, as a winemaker, how do you feel like you've put into practice dealing with different situations that involve apologizing, and then maybe we can touch on solving problems and risk-taking one at a time?
Sure. I've actually been thinking a lot about this, especially in the last 2 years since I came to Signorello, because prior to this, I was always a part of the team, but I never really had to lead it. And now in my new role at Signorello, that is a huge part of this job, is how to lead it. And I kind of went about it in many different ways. One of the first things that I had to address was, my vineyard crew has been at Signorello for, I think the shortest time one of our guys has been here has been 15 years. So they know this property, they've been tending to these vineyards, they know this estate, and this is the first time that they've had a woman leadership. So that dynamic was one of the first things I had to address. And I found that making myself accessible was the fastest way to do it. And so in that case, in that position, I decided that I would have no issues asking them questions, that I would have no issues listening to their opinions, and that I would apologize if, I made a decision that didn't actually go well for the team. What it did more than anything else is break down boundaries for me. And I really, really enjoyed, I think like every week I could see them get more comfortable and ask more questions and want to know more. And you have to be a little patient with it, but eventually they realize. And a huge part of that is also skills demonstration. So if we were trying to do something differently in the cellar or the vineyard, I would always make it a point to be the one to demonstrate, so that they realize that this idea doesn't just come from, somewhere in my head. I've actually done the work. I understand the nuances of it. And this is why I'm choosing to do it the other way. My biggest 3 best practices have been making your team more empowered. And one of the ways to do that was we have a female crew that kind of always was given these very specific tasks in the vineyard. And the one thing I chose to do was, there's no long-term, way to define whether this is a tangible improvement, but every Fridays for 2 hours, we partner up and we do a task that someone has never done before. And what it's done, it's just brought people together. I always pair someone who's more experienced with someone who hasn't done it. So there's a little bit of like a mentorship idea concept in there. And for 2 hours, they're just interacting as people that want to be in the tasting room, or that are our accountants, or that want to work in, want to know more about the vineyard. And it's the vineyard crew now being able to go back and say, I've been doing this 10 years. Let me tell you why I've been doing it. And that cross flow of information has been so great in terms of team communication and team spirit. Signorello right now is at a pretty pivotal moment. We're changing quite a few things in terms of how the estate is being taken care of. We have a new building coming up. We have a lot of construction that we're heading into. And so when you make such changes, it's important to take everyone along. And I feel like a lot of these practices of bringing the team together, breaking down barriers, being respectful, being mindful, and giving them opportunities to empower themselves has been a huge part of just growing together.
That's really great. I think that in every single aspect of that, you are taking a risk and putting yourself out there and forcing them to take a risk and to put themselves in different situations. And all those aspects of moving in all these different ways of understanding the winery really gives a lot more clear understanding overall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emma, as a CEO, how do you put into action the topics of apologizing, problem solving, and taking risks. We can do them one at a time if you'd like as well. I know they're all big topics.
They are all big topics. And, it was really kind of funny when you brought up apologizing the other day, because we all had kind of a different perspective on apologizing. And so when you said it to me, the first thing that came to mind was, well, I'm always apologizing because, like I said, I'm not perfect. And, if something goes wrong, it's my fault. Right. And so I'm always ready to apologize. And how do we make it better? Because let's fix the problem. But I also, at another level, our whole team knows that if you make a mistake, the worst thing you can do is cover it up. The most important thing is to say, uh-oh, this went wrong. Let's talk about it. Here's some ideas I have for solutions, because together we're going to find a really great solution to the problem. And if it means I need to go and apologize to somebody, I'm happy to do that. If we did something wrong, I'm there. And so that was one part of the conversation. But then you also said having an apology in your discussions. And so I thought about that. And when you're having a team building discussion, it is important to be a little gentler, whether you're male or female, in bringing forward new ideas. But if you have a good idea and you've researched it and you're ready to move forward, you shouldn't apologize for it. But you also need to be sensitive to how everyone else is going to accept it, because you may have thought about it a lot and no one else has thought about it at all. And so it's a shift, and everybody has their own comfort level with change. And I am a change junkie. And so I'm always like, oh yeah, let's do this. And other people are like, wait a second, I'm wearing the same pair of jeans like every day of the week. And I'm got my Converse high tops, and that's what I'm wearing. And now you want to change? So I'm a little bit of a change junkie. So it's just being sensitive to that, but don't apologize for being right, but be thoughtful in how you're responding. And like Kelli said, and how you're listening and presenting your ideas and problem solving. I mean, it's what we all do every day. And if you come with a problem, you should bring 3 solutions or one really great solution. If you come with a problem and you bring no solutions, then you're just complaining. And you need to think about that, because we're not here to complain. That brings everybody down. So let's focus on solutions. So that would be my one response to problem solving. And 2, that together we solve problems a lot better than one person on their own. And that's why we have team meetings for people to say, I was thinking about this and this, because together there's a lot of better ideas when we talk things through and throw out ideas. Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? So that's super important to problem solving. And then on taking risks, I would say when I was at Sebastiani, I worked for a gentleman, Richard Conley, and he was really great at asking a lot of questions. And I would go into his office and I'd say, I was kind of thinking of this. And he would ask me 3 questions, on whatever topic it was. And if I couldn't answer those with solid support for what I wanted to do, he would ask me like 20 more questions, and I'd really have to know my stuff. And so it taught me to really think through my ideas well and justify them well, because I knew when I was going to go in, if I didn't answer those first 3 questions, whatever they were that he was going to ask me, I wasn't going to get what I wanted. So I needed to do my homework. And so doing your homework is important. And if you haven't, then say, it was just an idea. What do you think? Should we look at it? And then you can go do your homework. So anyway.
That's a great way to look at it, especially coming from each angle and seeing all that background that you put into bringing all of those aspects forward. And especially in risk taking, for me, when you look at it and think, okay, well, now I have this idea, let's see if it's worthwhile, doesn't mean that something is going to stop. So I really love that aspect. And finally, Kelli, for this question, as an educator and writer, how do you go about thinking of the concepts of apologizing, problem solving, and taking risks Again, I know, I'm sorry, large topics, but I think they come up quite often.
That's okay. No, I would love to address this. And actually, when we did our little dress rehearsal the other week, this was one of my favorite topics because I think Priyanka and Emma had such amazing perspectives and points. And we all had this different idea of what kind of apologizing meant. And when I guess when I think about apologizing as a thing, especially in the context of women, I think of like kind of hesitant speech, like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't really understand this, but this is here, ... or, I'm not an expert, but blah, 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 where you're sort of like apologizing for yourself. And I will say that again, I don't necessarily feel like I'm the best person to talk about it because I still do that, much to my chagrin. I find myself, it's trained in me. I want to cut it out, but I feel that in meetings, I often will, find myself speaking like that. And I don't like it. I do it. I'm trying to stop doing it, but I will say that it has been my historical experience that it can be a thing that makes some men in the room more comfortable, because I do think, there are a lot of men that are still intimidated by powerful and strong-willed women. And it can be a little bit of an icebreaker or a softener, as Emma said. I kind of reward myself, the carrot I give myself after I'm done beating myself with the stick for talking too softly is to be really strong and sure when I am really strong and sure on a point. And, choosing those moments to, to speak with like absolute authority and say like, no, this is the thing. And I feel like in the game of chess, I play in my own mind with myself, that, by using that softer speech, as Emma said, to make people more comfortable, gives more weight to when I really draw a line in the sand. I do think it's unfortunate that I feel like I'm still there, right? Because I feel like a lot of men just live in that one lane all the time. But for me, it's as someone who's, oriented to getting things done, like I need to have both. Maybe one day I won't, but for right now, I do feel like both are necessary. And then, to talk about taking risks, this is interesting. Again, during our dress rehearsal, I was talking specifically about burning bridges, because we had discussed about how small the wine industry really is and how everyone is, really connected to some way. And, I made the point that I've been sort of pathologically nice to people through the course of my career that didn't deserve my kindness or affection. And that I was, a couple years ago on a panel with someone that I think is a real piece of garbage that, doesn't treat people well, doesn't treat women well. And, and that I felt like it would be random to suddenly kind of ice them out now after 15 years of being, very nice to them, but I kind of wanted to and wished I had. And then I said to you guys that, but at the same time, because the wine industry is so small, I'd have a hard time looking, a 25-year-old woman in the eye and saying, don't be afraid to burn that bridge. But, quite frankly, after all of the discussion in the article that came out this week and the article that came out that last year, I say, now I feel like burn the damn bridge, because otherwise other people are going to walk across that bridge. And so like, even just in the last couple of days, my opinion on that subject has really evolved, which is just a way of highlighting that, that we are all evolving too, as individuals and as an industry. So yeah, I mean, as far as social risks and, cutting bad people out of your life, like that's I think a worthwhile risk.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point to kind of come across. I think we're all kind of come to a coming of age moment in terms of risk. And what you highlight there, Kelli, is a really interesting viewpoint in terms of how we work through this in our own minds. There was one question I wanted to move into next after this, and it might feel like we're switching over gears a little bit, but I think it still works in with everything. Moving into workplace expectations for women and having a family and work-life balance overall as part of life. To all of our panelists, do you feel like there are unequal expectations put on women in the workplace? And Kelli, I'm actually going to start with you. So I know you just finished, but welcome back.
Yeah, there's nothing but unequal expectations. And I feel, this is something I'm particularly fired up on because I am currently 9 months pregnant. Zoom has been the best thing for the pregnancy because I exist from the shoulders up. From the shoulders down, I'm extraordinarily pregnant. And I think that, and I'm also 40, right? And this is my first kid, and there's a reason for that. And I've always been very ambitious and career oriented. And, my career has bounced around a bit from, retail and distribution to restaurants for a long time, and then into writing and education. And really up until now, I didn't feel financially or professionally like I could take the time and space to have a family. There was obviously other stuff going on too, but like that's a very large part of why I put it off for so long. And because I think it's real. I mean, I'm lucky to be working now in like a company that has structures and procedures in place. But, for almost a decade, I worked in the restaurant industry where, good luck having a baby, and you don't even get paid vacation, or sick days. So like have fun on your, on completely unpaid maternity leave, depending on, what state you're in, or even if they'll even save your job for you, depending. So I do think it's very unfair. My first interview for a job in the restaurant world, or second or something, it was for a restaurant that had been around for about 10 years, and they'd had, a lot of sommeliers. They had a big wine program, and the wine director looked at me and he said, and I asked him, I said, you've never had a female sommelier before. Is there a reason for that? Or is that just is that just life? I was in my late 20s. And he said, no, that's on purpose. He said, because yeah, God bless, he's not smart enough to know how to lie, but he's like, no, that's on purpose because it's really important to me that my employees stay for a really long time. And I feel like, and he sort of looked up and said, I just feel like women have more of an opportunity to leave. And I thought for a minute and I said, are you talking about husbands and babies? And he was like, yeah. I mean, he's like, it's natural. He's like, but like as running a wine program and running a business, it's a really big list. I can't afford to like hire somebody that then is going to need to take multiple months off. And then he's like, it just isn't practical for running a business. And this person was guileless enough to speak their mind. And quite frankly, I was grateful for it because I do feel like those are the unsaid words that still pop into people's heads when they're thinking about hiring a woman over a man for a particular job of a certain age. So, it certainly is unfair. I mean, I don't know how to fix it other than through like dramatic national reform, but we didn't put Bernie Sanders on the ticket. So I guess that's off the table for at least another 4 years.
Well, we'll have to see about what happens in that political side, but I think like I don't think I could have controlled the shockness in my face after hearing that. That's pretty intense. I will move next into Emma for your comments on this about the expectations of women in the workplace between having family and work-life balance.
I think that globally, there's an ingrained sexism in every workplace, not just the wine business. And, I shouldn't say every, but in a global sense, there is a sexism against women and babies and that sort of function and family. You see a lot of the statistics today of the COVID SIP that women are bearing a greater portion of the burden of taking care of the house, the children, and the job. And I think that it's perceived as the female role. I have a male friend who's a single dad, and his son was running through the grocery store, and he's telling the story of his son just running wild through the grocery store, skidding down the aisles. And people looked at him and laughed like, oh, the dad, he's got the kids for the day. That's the perception. He doesn't know what to do. If it were, and all of us said, if it were a woman, everybody would have been all over you. They just thought it was cute. I said, I get that it's not easy being a single dad, but the perception is you're cute. But if you're a woman, you're not taking care of your kid and you're not being on top of them and what should be done. And I think that perception is part of society. And the more we see men and women taking on equal roles in the family, the more we'll see that perception dissipating. And, we all have lives. I don't have any children, but, I have a life. And I get it sort of reversed earlier in my career because I didn't have kids. I was staying and working and doing the extra hours. And the perception was that I should. Whereas my colleagues are like, oh, I got the soccer game. I got the, and that perception as well. So it kind of comes around. I think we all need to acknowledge that everyone has a life. Everyone has someone, something that they love, that they want to do, that they want to be with, and they should have the ability to do so. It's not just me because I had a baby, you because you didn't have a baby, or you because you've got this other program. All of us need to be able to have balance and other things that we do in our lives, and we need to acknowledge that. So
very true. And then I'm going to throw it over to Priyanka for your thoughts on this as well.
I have quite a few thoughts on this, actually, because I feel like we're in a place across industries. This is not just for the wine industry, where we are spotlighting and highlighting female leadership and women in powerful roles, but we never ask the question of what it costs to get there or what it meant for someone to get there. For some reason, it's just assumed that if you want to be a powerful woman, you will figure out your career, you'll figure out when to be a mom, you'll figure out, how to get your family up and running. Everything will be just perfectly smooth. And no one asks what the cost of actually doing that is and what that means to a woman mentally, emotionally, physically. There's so many questions. And I strongly believe that the system has to be changed to assess a candidate's worth. The way we assess the efficiency, the credibility of an employee or a person in a business or in a professional setup is structured around that 9 to 5 timeline. And it's just, that cannot be the way to define a person's professionalism. It just can't. So I think that we really need to take a step back and understand, how is it that we are allowing employees to thrive, irrespective of all of these, personal choices. Whatever it is you choose to do, your work or your desire to succeed professionally shouldn't come at the cost of having to give something up. That's just not how it should be. And it should definitely not be at the cost of one gender bearing the brunt of doing that. When you have a baby, you're having it as a couple. It's not a woman's decision to have a baby. It's a family decision. And that is how every other decision thereafter should also be carried out. So I think that, for me, for example, on the production side, when I was working in the cellar, that was a tough one to be like, well, if I'm pregnant, how am I going to carry this bag around? But then I thought of it the other way. I said, why should it be that I have to carry this bag around? Can I come up with a system by which that physical brunt can be taken out so I'm not stressed about that job? And so that's kind of one way of the way I look at production at every level is, are we doing it because this is how it's done? Is this the best ergonomic method to get this done? Because if it's not, technology is on our side. There's no reason for us to say, no, the guy has to pick up this 50-pound bag of potash and take it across the winery. We shouldn't be doing it that way anymore. So I think that while, we do highlight female leadership, I think that it's needed. I think it's a conversation. And I think this is the next conversation that we need to have, is what systems are we putting in place to allow that to expand without taking away other aspects of a person's personal life. So I believe that there is a lot of conversation towards that inequality that needs to be had, that employers need to know that if you have, if Kelli was working on my team and she got pregnant, I'd say that's okay, because her credibility doesn't get defined by the 9 months of her being pregnant, in my opinion. And that's how we need to look at everyone who's on our team. So that, I'll leave it at that for now.
I love that whole, everything that you brought up, Priyanka. Thank you so much. I did have one last question, but I feel like we've actually already answered it in our discussion. So we'll move on to the Q&A, but just to let you know what it was, It was, is there any takeaway you have learned that our listeners can take to better implement to support other women in wine? So if anybody has anything quickly to add to that, Kelli, you had your hand up first, you go right ahead. And then we're going to move right into our Q&A questions.
Like the price is right.
Yeah.
No, because I really thought a lot about this. And so I want to say that I really feel that if you want to support women in general, in any industry, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color in any industry, in the wine industry, you need to learn not only to advocate for yourself financially, but when you are hiring women or Black, Indigenous, people of color, you need to advocate for them financially. Because I will say that I have found myself at multiple points in both my career and in personal relationships, unable to walk away from bad decisions because I couldn't afford to. And I think that that is, something that we don't talk about enough. We talk about hiring women and people of color, and that's great, but we have to pay them so that people are able to make best decisions for themselves and have the ability to walk away from bad decisions and not feel bound to something or someone that isn't good for them.
Thank you, Kelli. That's really must be said all the time. And we'll do Priyanka and then Emma, if you would like to as well, Emma. So Priyanka.
My biggest advice is seek your support system out. I think that some of, my female friendships have been a cornerstone to my success. These are women in my life that are friends, but they are people that, I look up to. I admire their drive. I admire who they are as people. I admire what they bring to the table. And they kind of act as a sounding board for me. I feel like a lot of times, and I know this is changing, but the landscape for female friendships professionally hasn't been allowed to be showcased in a way that we're able to do it now. And I think there is so much strength to be gained by bringing other women together, whether it's on a personal front or a professional front. I think there are some really great organizations that are coming together. I'm involved with the Batonage Forum, and one of the first reasons I even attended it the first year that they did something like this, and same goes with the Femmes du Vin organization, concept-wise, they've both been created from that same idea of, can I walk into a room and feel safe and feel comfortable and know that people will understand whatever I think is a stupid question. And I think that these organizations are really growing. They're really starting to address issues that all of us sometimes just think about in the corner of our mind, and then we wonder, how do I express it? How do I say it? And sessions like these really kind of help you understand how to address them in the workplace or how to address them on a more personal level. So I would say, if you don't already have it, actively seek a little network, a little support system, and learn to lean on it. Learn to say, hey, you guys, I need help. What do you think? Learn to lean into that.
Yeah. Emma, would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, great points, both of you. I mean, I think I've never been afraid to ask for help. I probably asked too much for help. People want to help you. It makes people feel good. People are happy to help. I think that's what we don't realize, that we're all, if someone needs something and they ask, you're happy to help. And we're all kind of ingrained that way. If someone asks me for help, it's like, oh God, I can't believe you asked me. No, none of us feel like that. Of course, we're going to help each other. That's who we are. And I think, some of the things I just, I mentioned earlier, it's not about you. Just embrace criticism, because you know what? We're not perfect. And there's things that I can do to get better every single day. And there's things all of us can do to get better. And so don't be like, oh, they mean it like this. Think about it and embrace the criticism, because, I think it's important. I think be honest, give direct feedback and prompt feedback to the people who are working for you and with you and above you, because very often, sometimes we all say something we didn't mean. Like something comes across with an innuendo that we didn't intend, or it just came out differently than we meant to say, and give people the chance to apologize, give people the feedback that they need, and do it quickly. Don't stew on it. You create your own happiness. Leave the drama at home. We all create our own happiness every day. And if that means responding to somebody that, hey, that wasn't appropriate, or is that what you really meant? Any of those things, or, could I be better? Asking for that criticism, asking for feedback, because we all have the sense like, I could have been better today. What did I do wrong? How could have I improved that? Ask for feedback, and give it promptly. And to Kelli's point about paying people equally, I think one of the greatest tools we have in the wine business is the Western Management Salary Survey, which also does salaries around the country for salespeople. And it is a super valuable tool. And we use it every time we hire someone. We want to pay someone the fair salary, the going rate, regardless of their male, female, whatever. We want to be sure that we're paying the right rate. And so use those tools to do that, because it puts everybody on an equal playing field. It makes it about the job, because you know what? That's what it's about. It's about the job. And as soon as people stop saying, well, she's a female wine writer, she's a female wine educator, she's a female winemaker, she's a female CEO, I would just like to say, Emma's a CEO, Priyanka's a winemaker, Kelli's a writer and an educator. And let's leave the female part off, because every time we tag that on, we're saying, yeah, but she's not a male CEO, right? She, and it's the same thing when you say, oh, she, he is a Black CEO, she is a Black CEO, or whatever. It's making it about your differentiating feature. It's not about the job.
You're not a normal CEO.
I'm not a normal CEO. I'm a female CEO. I got a survey recently that said, what's it like to be a working woman? And I thought, this is not a survey I'm going to bother to answer. Probably the same as it's like being a working man. This is not how we start the conversation. Yes, women have been working for a very long time. And let's make it about what we do, not about our gender, our race. Let's be about who we are and doing a great job.
Thank you so much, because it always benefits to hear those things again and to see all that behind it. Thank you very much, Emma. So I want to remind everybody that's watching today that if you do have any questions, just put them in the question box. We're going to move into our questions now for the question and answer portion of the seminar. Sorry about the delay start on that, but that last question, they had some great answers to it, so I couldn't let it go. The first question is one that really has to do with what's happening in the world of wine today. The question is, in reaction to the New York Times article, I know some women MS are coming together to demand change, and that is something we at Femmes du Vin are also actively working on. Is there a similar movement happening within the women in Napa wine community? If anyone wants to take that question.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think, we are addressing ethical behavior every day in what we do. And I think that is the role that we all play within the industry, is addressing ethical and appropriate behavior. And that's why we have great laws in California, and why we work for good organizations. And I'm sure we all feel strongly that ethical behavior is critical and vital in whatever job we're doing.
I agree with that. I think that, what we're reading about isn't an exception by any means. We've seen behavior like this across industries. The wine industry isn't the only one that's subject to it, and it's unfortunate, but the important thing is to recognize that this is an issue and it affects all of us in the working environment in one way or the other. And as Emma said, now is not where, it's no longer okay to say, well, this is how it used to be. It's just not. We're at a point where every conversation has to end up with a call to action. It has to end up with some actual change, an actual thing that has happened, to make sure that we're creating systems to protect victims like this in the future. So I think that if you are affected, or not even directly affected, know that it's an issue regardless, and whichever situation that you're in, whichever facet of the industry you're in, you should be actively thinking about it, and you should be thinking about what you can do to say no the next time.
And I just want to add one thing to that. Sorry, Kelly. Is just do the right thing. If all of us just do the right thing every day, the world will be a better place. And you know what? The right thing's not the easy thing. It never is. And that's how we need to behave. Sorry, Kelly.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that as far as I know, and I've been a little cloistered, just because of this pregnancy and COVID and everything. I mean, we all have been, but I'm not aware of any kind of organized Napa Valley female response. But I will say that among the women in my network here in Napa Valley, there's been a lot of really difficult conversations this past week and this past year about these topics. And, one of the things that's so shocking is that, I used to say that, as I was making new friends or new connections with women in the wine industry, or just in general, that if I hadn't heard their story of harassment, assault, or rape, it was just because I didn't know them well enough yet. And I think that this is just so pervasive in our professional lives and also our lives in general. And it's really sad that so many of us just thought it was something to bear in silence. And it takes these kind of big moments for the barriers to break down. And so having a lot of sad conversations with people I care about things that that happened to them, that I didn't know about, that happened to me, that they didn't know about. And if there had been more communication, or if it had been better, it would have been okay to speak up about these things publicly, and there hadn't been the retribution, then these things wouldn't have been allowed to perpetuate. And so I don't know, again, of an organized response, but it does feel like there is a growing kind of Jungian, internally organized cultural response kind of building that is both, hard and hopeful.
It's really interesting to see these types to see the conversations that have blossomed from the article. We also have another question based around it, which I've seen come up a lot lately. And it's in response to this article, people have been looking at alternative questions for educational pathways that all of you would recommend outside of CMS. We did speak a bit about this before, but it looks like this is in direct response to sommelier work. So maybe Kelly, if you would like to start.
Sure. So I worked as a sommelier between 2009 and, through various degrees of commitment, 2016, 17. When I got started, it was through other avenues. So I started in distribution, learned about wine, and then changed to restaurants. And I didn't have, I didn't go through the CMS. I did the certification, I think in 2009, and then didn't take it any further. I know I worked for Guild Somm later in my career, but it was not specifically for the CMS. It was just more as a staff writer. So, I didn't go through that system necessarily, and I still had a successful career. The way that I got started was my first real sommelier job. Well, my first sommelier job was at the Oak Room in New York City, which I was fired from immediately, which was awesome. Not my fault, but I was fired within I think 2 days. And then I got a job at Veritas, which was amazing. And it was this really it's closed. So, some of you probably don't know about it, but at the time it was one of the biggest wine lists in the world and had a really intense wine program. It was a wine program, and the food was sort of there too, right? But it was a wine restaurant, and they had never had a female sommelier before. The clientele was super not into it for a while. But we all figured it out together, and it was great. And that was much more of a apprenticeship based learning. And so I learned from the wine director and the other sommeliers, and really just attached myself to them, and learned kind of on the job. And I found that to be great, but it was very intense. I would my hours there were from 2 p.m. to probably 2 a.m. every day. And I would spend, and it was a wine list, this thick, and I would spend from when I woke up to when I went to work studying that wine list and reading about old vintages of Burgundy and, bugging people that knew more than me and to teach with me and going to trade tastings when I could. And so I know that's not an official answer, but like that apprentice-based path, if you can align yourself with a restaurant, if we're talking specifically about sommelier work, or a wine director or somebody that you want to specifically learn from, I think, obviously COVID, who knows, but like if we emerge from this with a restaurant industry, then hopefully that path is still available, the apprentice-based learning, which served me very, very well. And then, now I'm in the MW program, and I did the WSET thing when I was first starting in the wine industry, like as a 21-year-old, basically because I got my work to pay for it when I was working in retail. I thought the WSET program was great. I finished it in 2004, so it's been a really long time. And then I've been in the MW program. But again, the MW program, we have some seminars and things, but it's mostly independent study. So once again, I have found myself like with a group, in my case, of 2 women, and we study together and we hold each other up and hold each other accountable and give each other challenges. And that's the world. So my education, I understand if people are completely disillusioned with the CMS, like rightly so. There are other pathways. I know that like some of the younger generation, like I think Christy Norman in LA is doing some stuff with wine education. If you don't want that formal, rigid, Britishy WSET thing or the CMS kind of thing, there are other places to go to nowadays. I just don't know that there's, that they're not as official. But personally, in my experience, the apprentice-based learning and the group-based learning, aligning yourself with specific people that you want to kind of learn and grow with has been really rewarding. I feel like that's a non-answer. I'm not answering this question.
No, you answered it. I feel like you answered it really well. There's options out there for people, and the option suits the person that's looking for it. So you don't always have to be with CMS, but I feel like you answered it really well and with many good factual examples, I might add. So I am going to move on to one of our other questions, which is really different from the background that we've had the questions at before today. And this question is directed directly to Priyanka. So they would like to know for Priyanka whether being an Indian added a barrier to her success in whether in her success and whether the women are seeing more diversity overall in Napa Valley. So Priyanka and everybody else, please.
So what's the question if being an Indian was a barrier to my...
Yeah, so they said, sorry, it comes in a very small typeface. So they would like to know what your cultural background, if it's added any barriers to your success in the career path that you've taken.
That is a really good question. I didn't allow it to be a barrier. I don't know if that is an answer. There definitely have been situations where I've been singled out for being the Indian in the room. And I think it was something I realized very early on, that there would be many situations in the future as I kind of go ahead in this industry where I would be the only Indian in the room. And I made a decision very early on to not take any of those comments personally, or to, even allow it to sway my decision of what I wanted to do. I was very determined of what, I knew what I wanted to become and where the direction I wanted to move in. And I was very fortunate that I found good people that recognized that and that gave me an opportunity to keep growing. I definitely did seek out very specific mentors because of it, because I knew that my ability to move would kind of depend on, exactly what Kelli said, that apprenticeship-based approach when you enter an industry is so invaluable because of the kind of just even emotional support you get when you align yourselves with people that understand you and that understand the quality of work that you're willing to bring to the table. So I would say that my mantra with that was drown out the noise. So I just never paid attention to it.
I really like that thought process. And the other part of the question, it looks like we have kind of answered it a little bit as well, but there's another one here, and I want to get one more in before we end our conversation today, maybe two, we'll see. But the next one I'm going to actually throw to Emma, because it feels like it's something that you would have a great understanding in. And the question is, when it comes from a business background, are there specific skill sets that one should acquire to work in the business side of the industry?
I think it's helpful to understand the winemaking process, to understand viticulture. There's a lot of classes that you could take at night to just get some background in winemaking, even, doing the CSW online, just to understand the production process and the viticultural process of winemaking, I think is very helpful. But if you're curious and you're smart, particularly, I think finance and marketing, and sales are, well, maybe not sales so much, but are easier avenues to come from outside of industry into the wine business, because you're specialized in your skill set. You're specialized in finance. You're specialized in accounting and budgeting and so forth. But I do think, many wineries, you have to wear a lot of hats. The finance person is often responsible for HR and IT, and both of those skills need to be strong, especially for a smaller winery if you want to take a more senior role. And it's a hard transition to go from a professional environment, whether you're working in finance, public accounting, any of those things, the salary level that you're transitioning to is not necessarily going to be equal. And the skill set that you use is going to be a little bit different, because there isn't necessarily somebody, an extra staff person to do that job for you, right? So a lot of things you have to do yourself, and you need to be flexible in doing that. And you need to be curious about everything that's going on in the business. You're not just in one business. And I think coming from public accounting, we worked with a lot of family-owned businesses getting ready to go public. We worked with retail, wholesale, and a great deal of different industries. And I think that's a big advantage that a CPA, particularly from public accounting, brings to the field, is that diversity of businesses that you've seen. But, a couple classes, you'll have fun, right? It's more exciting than a master's in tax class on IRS procedure. I can tell you it is much more exciting than that.
We don't have to take it for you to tell us that. Okay. I love it. And it looks like we have time for one more question, but thank you, Emma, so much. That was it's really interesting to see how we can think about wine and the multitude of it, not just enjoying it for the passion that we have. And last question that's come through is to the panelists. How do you have advice on advocating for yourself as an employee? Anybody want to start? I think we're going to go for Price is Right standards. Emma, sorry. Now I have you on my mind. Kelli has her hand up first.
Well, I feel like it's my question since we talked about compensation, but I will say this, I think, you need to go into any job negotiation understanding your range, right? How much do you want this? Put a number on how much you want this job. What is the absolute minimum you would do it for? And do not start there, right? And also don't be afraid to put out the first number, because if you let them put out the first number because you feel shy about it, then you are kind of trapped within a little bit of a range, right? And so you want to be the one to put out the first number. I know that is incredibly uncomfortable. But I would say, first of all, have an understanding of what the range is for the skills you offer, and be honest for the job that you're interviewing for. Have a sense of the range, and then have a sense of, be honest with yourself if there's something special that you're adding that might bump that up, or if you are perhaps formally less qualified, in which case you might understand if it was a little bit less. Be generous with yourself, but also be honest with yourself. And then I would take whatever it is that is your bottom line, whatever you do for, and add 25% and start there. Because then you have a little ways to back down, if they'll negotiate with you. And remember, if you feel uncomfortable, you are doing this not just for yourself, but for all women, because we have to normalize paying women more equal, if not, like, why not aim for more for these jobs? Because we don't need another salary survey to tell us that women are not getting paid equally for equal work, right? So you have a whole, like 50% of the planet behind you, should be inspiring you to ask for more money than you are personally comfortable asking for. And what's the worst that could happen? Like, who's ever really been laughed out of a job interview for asking too much money? I mean, it could happen, in which case, I'm sorry I gave you bad advice. Chances are maybe they'll think you're like pretty, like, have a lot of moxie, and are a strong negotiator. Even if you don't walk away with what you asked for, like, maybe that makes a strong impression. It could be obnoxious, but it could also work in your benefit.
That's true.
I would just sort of say to that, you might put yourself out of the range. So be thoughtful that you're within that range, because if I'm looking at a job that pays, 70 to 90,000, depending on the skill set, and you tell me you want 110, then I'm like, you're not going to be happy even at the peak of my range. So you need a different job. And so I probably wouldn't take you further in the interview process if you told me you wanted 20 grand over the peak salary, because if that's your requirement, then that's not our range, and I think but we do a lot of research on range and appropriate pay and that sort of thing when we do that. So I that would just be my take.
I think
my biggest piece of advice in that situation is, when you are entering a situation like that, as a job application or as a contractor proposal or whatever it is that you're entering, start by identifying why you're an exceptional candidate. And that's a very difficult thing to do. It's easier said than done, but it's really important for you to sit down and say, I know, this is my skill set, this is my experience. What is it about me in that position that would really make it an exceptional situation? And when you start marking those points down, as Kelli mentioned and Emma said, when you put that number, you automatically have reasons why that number is what it is. And even if you don't end up expressing it, it gives you that self-confidence of knowing that you are the right candidate for the job. And I think it comes across in terms of your body language. It comes across in terms of how confident you are when you speak. But you have to always identify why you would be, a special candidate. And sometimes that could just be with, I am so passionate about this that I would really, really work hard at this opportunity. But you have to be able to vocalize those sentiments and, do your research. We're starting to really see good numbers put out there in terms of what is an industry average, what is especially when it's defined, when the job description roles are very well defined. You have a good set of data that now shows you what you should be earning. So definitely do your homework, know why you're special, and then walk in with that confidence of knowing all that.
And one more thing.
Yes, of course, Kelli, go right ahead.
Because I'm assuming that everyone listening to this panel is going to one day be a powerful woman in a hiring position. And so I just want to say this, that I think that I had a very interesting conversation with someone once that said to me, there's no such thing as the best person for the job, because this is something we hear a lot, that there's the best person for the job. This reminds me of Emma's thing of like, this is the way we've always done it, right? And I would say, if you are in a position to hire people, hire the person and not the resume, because that's the best way to address inequality in upbringing and opportunity, right? People, based on their financial situation that they were born into, based on the color of their skin, based on their gender, are going to probably have different opportunities and different pathways than, somebody else, right? And so if you're just hiring the resume, you might just be staying with the status quo, right? Somebody that was, let's just say, like white, male, born wealthy, they may have a better resume, but they may not be ultimately the better person for the job if you're thinking about the person and not the resume. And I think that that's an important thing. So like, we can advocate for ourselves as people that are not at the top, but when we get to the top, we need to remember these things and to look past, and that will help look past things like certifications and hopefully de-emphasize that if that's what the way the industry wants to go, which.
Yeah. And that plays to asking really good interview questions, right? And asking about the person and telling the story around the resume and why, what did you learn at that job? It's not just that job. What did you do? Right? Those are two different things. What you did and what your resume says are really kind of two different things, because how you behave every day and behavioral based interviewing is super important to delve into that question, to understand who the best candidate is. Maybe not the best person for the job, but the best candidate you have in front of you. You need to know how they react in everyday situations. And that behavioral based interviewing really helps with that. And being thoughtful. And so in that interview, you may not have any wine experience, but you should tell me what you've done that I should be impressed by. Show me your leadership. Show me how you were creative. Show me how you changed a process. Show me how you inspired someone else, how you worked as a team, because that's what I want to know. When I listen to what I'm asking you, I ask you to walk me through your resume and to tell me what you did that you enjoyed the most at that job. If you just walk me through your resume and you don't tell me that, which I just asked you, tell me what you enjoyed about that job, tells me you didn't enjoy anything. I mean, come on, tell me what brought you joy today, because if you're not happy to come to work and do something cool, then, you're probably not going to fit with our team.
I think this has been such a great conversation. And thank you, Emma, Kelli, and Priyanka, for all bringing forward such different aspects and thought process in how women in wine can move forward into more powerful roles in the future and currently, hopefully, in their lives as well. I'm sure somebody's doing that at this current moment in time. And about the amazing opportunities that Napa Valley has as well. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us here today. And thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. And don't forget to communicate with us on social media, everybody. Our seminar is ending today, but at 2 p.m. we'll be back again with the World Wine Web. So in less than 30 minutes. And we have some amazing panelists on there as well with Sarah Del Mato, Madeline Puck, Tahara Habibi, as well as Magdalena Pesce for that full conversation. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.